Welcome, everyone. This is the first of a couple Pleasant Valley Plot podcasts. My name's Dan Edmonds. I'm the owner of Pleasant Valley Food Plots, and I wanted to create something that was informative for everybody out there. And as I've been doing this for a couple of years now, I'm seeing the same mistakes and the same questions over and over again. Anybody that's out there that wants to go into the agricultural side of hunting and try to install their own food plot, I want to try to get out there some things that, in a couple hours of listening to me through a couple podcasts, you can confidently go on your own and try to be able to put in the ground a food plot for you guys and create a unbelievable hunting experience. I have Pleasant Valley Food Plots. I've been doing food plots since I've been a kid. I grew up on a farm, thankfully. Hunting's been the way of life in our family for a couple generations. So to be able to combine the two is just nothing but fun for me. And I was fortunate enough to be able to turn it into business that is the most rewarding thing I could possibly do in my life. I just love it. And also it changed everything for me also with getting my wife and our two girls into hunting. And it's showed me a whole different spectrum of how to hunt and how to hunt successfully with two people and people that are inexperienced, and being able to create an unbelievable environment that no matter what time or when we're out, we're always seeing deer and we're getting lucky. And it's been a lot of fun. So I want to go over you guys today. I want to go over the do's and don'ts of planting. I want to go over the business side of the food plot company I have. I want to go over things that I think would make you successful today, a little bit of history and a little bit of where we're going. I want to go over my seed blends, mid-roll blends, and a generalization of a little bit of everything. Then I'm going to do another segment after this, and we're going to talk about what I think is why you're spending the money and putting in a food plot and how to hunt your food plots. That's a big thing I see. I see a lot of people that have everything there and they're just putting too much pressure and they're not doing things correctly and they're blowing the food plots out and they're not getting what they can out of them. Then we're going to do a third podcast. I'm going to have a guest here. I'm going to have Glenn Hendricks, who's a friend of mine and is in the agricultural business of selling. He's selling and consulting for seed and chemicals. So I want to get some more technical stuff that if you guys are curious about, that I've learned, and it's something that's real important to the science of what I do. And I'm going to kind of ask him some questions, things that are I think that are very important. We're going to talk about something that he does in the hunting industry, which I think is very important. And it's such a big deal for me because we've used Glenn a couple times. He has a deer recovery business, and there's nothing like having a young kid get a deer that's, right where everything should line up, but the shot placement's just a little off and the deer's dead and you got no blood and you really need to find that deer and you need somebody to call. This is the person that'll absolutely change everything. So let's get started. I wanted to first introduce again myself as Dan Edmonds, owner of Pleasant Valley Food Plots. I grew up a little farm outside of McKeansburg in Pennsylvania. It's a little south of Pottsville. Everybody worked, but we had a farm there. We mainly did hay, had some pigs and some horses, a little of everything there. Started out, my grandfather was raising chickens and it was an egg farm. And so I was always around tractors. I was always around equipment. I was always around the fields. And I was very fortunate enough to have my Uncle Kevin there who, all his knowledge that he had for farming and really taught me the do's and don'ts of just being able to read your soil, just equipment use, operation of equipment. And then him and I experimented over years and started planting food plots at our farm. We enrolled our property in the CREP program. We did some wetlands restoration, and we pretty much built our whole property basically for wildlife and hunting. We did some select timber cuts, and we just tried to create like the ultimate property for deer. Fortunately, we're in an area where not everybody has 10,000 acres, so there's a lot of pressure, which when living in Pennsylvania, that's pretty much half of your hunting is hunting around other people that affect deer habits and directions. So him and I over the years started out like we started out. Obviously, everybody knows cornfields and here and soybeans. That's kind of a given. But what I tried to first do was just give our deer that palatable nutrition, that green nutrition, to hold them there through archery season and in the rifle season. Because once all your crop was down, your farm would basically lay naked and there wouldn't be a good source there other than acorns. So I just liked afternoon hunting and being able to pattern the deer a little bit more, see the deer a little bit more. When trail cameras really started getting big, we started planting these green fall food plots. I think we started out doing turnips before I really knew a whole lot. Then I made some clover fields. And then I finally detailed my blends that I have now, starting off with just our brassica mixes. And I started planting brassicas. Brassica is basically a turnip that doesn't produce a bulb. We're all familiar with purple top turnips. They're great. So it's basically that same leafy nutrition without the big bulb at the bottom. I also started finding out that, with a food plot, you can have your deer there all summer. And obviously going into the fall, the more ground you have, the better. Not everybody's got 10 acres to do 10 different food plots. A lot of people are around that 1 acre. So I really started doing different blends where, early season when something first comes out of the ground, buckwheat. Deer love buckwheat right off the bat in like early summer. They will congregate to that and they will chew that to the ground. And then as the season progresses, we have soybeans in there. We have some winter peas, winter wheat, triticale. I have a blend of brassicas, and you could throw some clover and turnips in there. Sounds like a lot, but when you see it growing, and some of it competes with each other, but in the end, you have pretty much, as soon as that comes out of the ground, you got deer on it till literally January, February, till the last turnips dug out of the ground. And you can really have an experience on 1 acre that can change your whole family's way of hunting. I mean, we have some ground now that I do for some clubs. One in particular, it's about 1.5 acres. And the last 2 years ago, they shot 11 deer off of one food plot out of one stand. And they only let the kids of the members of the club hunt there. And then the next year, they shot 9 deer off the same field, same stand, same everything. And one of them, a little girl, shot 155-inch buck out of that same stand. So 2 years, 20 deer, all kids. Almost all of them were with the crossbow and early archery. And it just changed that whole family, the way of their life, and getting their kids out and getting everybody into it. And before that, they couldn't even barely take their kids hunting because it was all in the woods, morning hunting. And it was just hard to get the family to be a part of the club. And now we do 3 different food plots for them. And from turkey hunting on, everything revolves around those food plots. So I want to talk about also, I said the progression that I've went through and where now our business has gone. So once I kind of figured out the recipe of what I thought was a successful planting and was able to put deer in front of me and to get people hunting and to get my own family hunting on it. In the business I have a landscape company as well as a mulch and topsoil company. As I'll talk and tell you about, like, everything kind of morphed into one big collaboration. I'm able to pretty much do everything from excavating the food plots, bringing in topsoil if need be, and then being able to have the right equipment to be able to everything, and then having the right equipment that's mobile enough that I can take it to you, get myself up on a mountain, and be putting in these little food plots for people. We started Pleasant Valley Food Plots, I think, probably about 5-6 years ago, where I actually put a name to it. We started a website and I started a Facebook page, started the advertising. We also went as far as, with the help of Glenn and Bird Seed, started our own custom seed blends. And that was a big help, being able to control exactly what I have. I went to what I know of the best seed company, and I basically put the most expensive fertile seeds together, and I put them in different rates, and I put them at different poundages for everybody to, if they want to do blends, or anywhere from 1/2 acre to 1 acre, or some places we do 10 acres. I also then went and I make an attractant. We do deer mineral, which has been a huge help for all the things we do. I make 4 different flavors. We do apple, acorn, caramel, and peanut butter. And my best friend Kyle and his company, very fortunate enough that they do is they do minerals and supplements in the cattle industry. But also Kyle had a deer farm and raised deer for years and was around a lot of people that raised deer. So what he did, all his knowledge, he was able through genetics that he raised the largest deer at 3.5 years old, scored 400 inches. That deer put him on the map. What we started doing, him and I, was he would always mix me up a couple bags of mineral, and we would, mix and combine salts and flavors and stuff and get those deer what they needed nutrition wise, and also to have an attractant for your cameras. So as their company grew and changed a little bit, their order size changed. So when you did order from them, it had to be a pallet at a time. So I started going full tilt with this mineral. We, at that time, came up with the 4 flavors I told you about. We came up with some advertising, and we also did some attractive labels. Started out making 50-pound bags, and I realized that most people just needed something that they could carry into their stand, cut the top of it off, dump it out. And we went to a 15-pound bag. And that was able to stay competitive financially, and it was easier for people to manage and carry around. Got to be careful though, like in different states, there's different laws. Here in Pennsylvania, mineral have to have all remnants of that removed 30 days prior to the hunting season. You got to be really careful. I actually go as far as putting down a piece of wood or a metal plate or my mineral on top of there. I use it mainly for the attractant side of it. But like I said, going back to what Kyle did with the deer he raised, he came up with a nutritional formula to get the most antler out of his deer possible, because that's what it all comes down to when you're raising deer. It's antler size in inches. So with his formula of his antler growth, magic mix, and what we mixed it with an attractant and a flavor, and that's where we were able to come up with that mineral. I think it's the greatest thing ever. It puts bone on their head, increases their antler size. It gets the deer there. They love it. And then you're not dealing with all the competitive animals. Like, everybody loves throwing some corn out, which isn't really the best for deer. But then you got a problem when you have the corn, and your trail camera's sitting there. You can get 1,000 pictures of crows and raccoons eating corn. So I kind of got away from any kind of seeds or corn or, soybeans. And I just went to maybe a couple bags of mineral a year at each one of my spots. Now, again, it's not a food. It's a supplement. So the deer won't eat it all, but they'll at least come over, nose around, take a couple licks, couple bites, and you get their picture and they move on. That's been a big part. And the seeds itself, seed blends, I'll go over with you guys a little bit of some of the stuff we have and the differences. But for right now, I just want to at least get you guys at a point where we start talking about building your food plot. Biggest thing is having that source of food for your property. And we're not going to lie about it. I mean, it's not a cheap thing. I mean, just the fertilizer, the seed, being able to do it. I'm probably, that's one of my number one questions. I think as any kind of businessman, like you want to try to get a price out there right away for people and get people interested and be competitive. But like doing an acre food plot, for me to come there, mobilize, get to your property, depending on if you need lime, spraying, mowing, all the different things. We do it all, but some customers do a little of their own work to get us prepared. But a food plot's anywhere, around $1,500 to $2,500 for an acre. And that's with mobility included. We charge time and material. And to get there, get your seed, get your fertilizer, get everything done, and get out of there, it's an investment. So I want to also, promote my company as well as those do-it-yourselfers and talk about some of the things I do. I'm fortunate enough that equipment that I have, even though food plot season is just a window from usually around July till September, I only got about 2.5 months there of really work. I'm fortunate enough to be able to put the equipment that I have to work at other places to make it affordable. Like I said, about 5-6 years ago, we really went all in. We invested in the equipment. We invested in our seed blend. We invested in our mineral. And I tried to create, a full experience for somebody that gives me a call and wants to improve their property. One of the things that I see people that they think they need to do that they don't is they always try to bring a food plot to spots. So say they have 100 acres. I get to these properties. They're like, hey, I want to go all the way up on the mountain. I want to cut these trees down and I want to put this secret food plot in the woods. And it's just not economical. I mean, what it takes to clear an acre of land, get stumps out, do all that stuff, you can spend anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to try to excavate an acre to get a road up in there. I try to promote, if you'd see where our food plots are, a lot of them are right at the bottom. They're in an established field or something at least I can get in and that's manageable, that I can till and work the soil. And then I end up sitting on the food plot and hunting. I'll try to take the food plot to where I've been traditionally hunting. So that's one of the big things, is like placement of your food plot is very important, and accessibility. Can you get there with equipment? That's like number one. And then, everything else follows in line when it comes to agriculture. You want to get a soil test. Soil tests are everything. They'll tell you everything you need. We're going to get into it a little bit more technically with Glenn on our third podcast, but this was explained to me. I'll explain it to you so that you can understand pH a little bit. pH is on a scale up to 7. 7's neutral. So for you to achieve a 7, which is really hard to do, anywhere over 6.5, you're usually good. 7 pretty much is the standard or baseline to where all ability can be absorbed and used from your plant. So I'll go back a little bit, try to make this understandable. Let's use 100 as your scale. 100 as in 100 pounds and then 100%. So each point on your pH scale equates to about 30%. So if you have high pH, your number will go down on your scale. Where I'm from in Schuylkill County here, everything's acidic. And pretty much everywhere I go, if I open up ground, get it tested, and it hasn't been worked for 10 years or 15 years, usually around a 5. So again, let's go back. Every point, about a 30% loss. So if you're at 7, and that's neutral, that's 100%. You go down to 6, that's a point. Looking at 30% or 30 pounds. And then you go from 6 to 5, another 30 pounds or 30%. So what I'm saying is, if your ground is at 5 in the pH scale, 5, over half of all your nutrition is lost. So half your seed's not going to be where it should be in its growth cycle. And more importantly, half your fertilizer not be used. I mean, you're basically throwing half of everything away. And then on top of all the different things out there with, drought, too much rain, too much predation, you want your food plot to be at its max capacity, being able to be as rich as possible, because it's meant to be eaten. So the more palatable tonnage that you have there, the longer your food plot's going to last. I want to try to first establish that you have the correct pH. I also then want to see what kind of ground you have. I mean, is it ground that's been worked? Is it ground that hasn't? How overgrown is it? So like I said, when people call me, I try to go out for a consultation, meet them, get their expectation, how they like to hunt. And then also I need to get a soil sample, and I can get me a quote for them to see about what it's going to cost. A lot of people, and I sell what I do as a fall food plot, because obviously that's when the season is for me and I got going on. Otherwise, outside the food plot company, spring is very difficult for me. So I held this, works out perfect for me, because basically my slowest time in my other businesses is that July and August and September timeline. And it makes it way easier for me to be able to get committed into something else and doing the food plot. So once we get there, the other thing is, once I get there, we do our rounds. We basically travel to all the people, all of our customers, and we start in June, July, weather permitting, and we spray. We get everything in that food plot that's already there, it's established, killed. Now, all I use is glyphosate, which is pretty much Roundup. I find that as a big mistake. A lot of people are spraying too much stuff on their food plot, and they end up, it can, like, for example, 2,4-D stay in your soil, and that's a broadleaf killer. A lot of people are familiar with that. But if you spray that on your food plot in a combination with Roundup, that will stay in your soil, and it could stay and be residual for up to a year. So then you go and plant your stuff, and anything like your peas and your winter wheat, all that stuff will end up dying. And your brassicas, even, a lot of them could be affected. And the only thing that'll come up out of the ground basically is your winter wheat, triticale, or oats. You got to be very careful. I've had that mistake happen with a lot of customers that sprayed the wrong chemical and they overdid it. and ended up affecting what they have there for a couple years down the road. And like a quart per acre to 2 quarts per acre, depending on the volatility of what you have there, 1 to 2 ounces per gallon is generally where I'm at. Don't need to overdo it. I've had people that sprayed 3-4 times and use gallons of spray. That's not what you need to do. And we're going to get into a little bit more too on the agricultural side. When you're spraying, a lot of guys are using 4-wheeler stuff. That's great. You should be generally like where I'm at. Now there's different nozzles, different types of sprayers, and the different nozzles are the different sizes and droplets. And then therefore you're using more gallons per acre. But what I'm running right now on our sprayers, the yellow tips, and I'm running right now at about 15 gallons per acre. That's it. So if that helps anybody out there, if you're doing an acre, if you have a 20 gallon sprayer, you should be able to calibrate that sprayer and control the speed. That 20 gallons is all you need for that acre. Again, with Roundup, you can't really go too much over, and it's going to stay in the soil. You can make a mistake and put it on too heavy. I suggest to people I'd almost rather see them spray it twice, instead of trying to soak it down and do it all at one time. And then also, like, people ask me too, like, how to prepare the food plot for when I'm getting there. I tell them to at least mow it once or twice, but I like what's there to be at least knee high, so that people got to realize too that spray is taken in by the plant. So the more green that it has, the more leaf that it has on the plant, or it's going to accept the spray and be able to work longer and stay there and kill the plant. That's not, that's unwanted in your food plot. We get there, we spray. I let it go for a couple weeks, and then we'll return back and we'll mow it if need be, if the customers will mow it. Then depending on what kind of condition the ground's in, if it's like been there for a long time and it's sod, we have chisel plows, and I'll chisel plow the property first. Sometimes I'll set up that piece of equipment and we'll actually go and travel, and I'll chisel plow all my places. And then as the ground sits up and flips over, it dries out a little bit and it makes it easier for me to come back and disc. Some of our established food plots that we've doing every year, I basically disc the food plot 2 directions, get it loosened up. Then what I'll do is I use, because of mobility, a Vicon spreader, which is basically like your upside down ice cream cone spreader. I think mine holds 500 pounds, which is plenty for an acre. What I'll do is I'll broadcast the seeds first. And then again, our seed rates are usually anywhere from 100 to 200 pounds an acre. If you really want to get technical and you have drop spreaders or a disc spreader, or a no-till spreader, you can definitely cut your rates way down. I put usually too much on our properties, but also the conditions that I'm in sometimes warrant going a little bit crazy. You're going to be able to, some's going to get tilled under too far, some's going to be on the surface. So you're going to lose the rate of germination, and probably your percentages are going to go down. So I overcompensate a little bit. Again, I'm providing a service for somebody. I want to make sure that their ground's completely covered. And I usually put a little bit too much seed, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. And then the other problem that people have then too is, the different seed types. Like your brassica seed is like a very tiny little peppery size seed, where obviously your peas and your beans and your winter wheats, we all know what that seed looks like. But what I'll do is, everybody says you can't really mix it. So but I found that you can, as long as you're field side and you're not driving around, that your seed vibrates out. I have a little method where I'll mix in my brassicas with my larger seeds a little, and I swish around inside the seeder. And then to be safe, what I'll do then is I'll actually add brassica or turnip or clover, since it's a lighter seed. I'll actually add it in with my fertilizer too. And I usually then go the opposite direction in the field with the fertilizer. That way I know no matter what, my whole field's completely covered and I'll have no bare spot. Again, I'm providing a service for somebody. I want them to be able to have a beautiful green field. Then one of the other things I do that's very important that people need to do, you have to do this, you have to put an exclusion cage. That exclusion cage will tell you everything. If it's 4x4, 4 stakes up, wrap some chicken wire, a couple ribbons on there, and that will tell you what's going on in your food plot. It'll tell you how many deer you have there. If you have a lot, if you don't, it'll tell you what's going on, because if you don't, you have the deer eating it. I have some food plots where there's literally 30 to 40 deer and they just get crushed. I mean, they do. And, again, as a service, and if somebody was, customer was going out to the field, and it's literally jaw dropping when you would see the difference of that exclusion cage versus inside and outside the cage. Getting to the point now where now that some of these food plots we've been doing so long, it just became generational with the deer herd that's there. So every deer on the mountain is coming down to these food plots, and they're just getting hammered. So a lot of people that I have, a lot of customers are actually fencing their food plots in, and they're removing the fence, up until, right up to the first day archery season. That way they have something left. If their season makes it into the rifle season, you got something there. Because I tell you what, one thing that I try to hang my hat on as staller food plots is I always want to tell my customer that if there's a failure, I want to make sure that I'm not in any part of a failure if there's a crop failure there. Again, we're all farming. Once you start farming, you're at the mercy of baby Jesus and what's going to happen out there. I mean, I've had years where it was basically a drought. I've had years where it actually rained too much, which isn't good for brassicas. They'll yellow them up. They don't like too much rain. And I've, again, had problems where there was too many deer at a property and the food plot just wasn't as established as I wish it was. And that'll show you, that'll be your proof that your exclusion cage show the difference. I have some pictures that are mind-boggling where I literally have soybeans inside the fence and they're growing up and out of the fence that they're 5 foot tall. And outside of the exclusion cage, I have a whole acre of soybeans that are literally 2-inch nubs that they took them down to nothing. So yeah, it's very important. And then, again, as a business, I want to try to tell people the blends that are going to take the most predation, give them the fullest amount of production as far as what they're able to do hunting wise through the year. And then by me adding the winter wheat and triticale and oats and mixing it with a little clover, if the customer decides then not to use not to use me anymore, or, they just decide they're good enough, or at least going into the spring for turkey season and over the summer, if I am coming back, it'll hold the weeds down. So that's why I like to use winter wheat, triticale, some oats, and then mix some clover in so that the next year you at least have a green field. You have some cover there for erosion, some cover to hold back the weeds, and you're able to still have some nutrition in that food plot other than just going with like corn or soybeans or turnips. You don't have that spillover, that next year coverage that I think is very important. Also, I think timing is very important. I had some people that, bought turnips and brassicas and thought they planted them in May or June. And you got to be really careful. All those things that I'm providing for our fall blends are actually a cool season crop, and they shouldn't be planted any earlier in July. I did plant a little earlier this past year just because for some reason the ends of the season they were getting too wet. So I tried early and I had no problems. The end of July I had awesome fields. They actually may have matured a little too early. And then by planting earlier, you got to be careful because then you'll get that foxtail crop. Foxtail can annihilate a food plot and completely take it over. So you got to be careful. If you go too early and you turn that, you'll get the foxtail germination and you'll get way too many weeds. And are the weeds really going to matter? No, the deer don't eat them, but it just takes away from the production, and it steals basically your nitrogen out of the soil, and it holds back what you have as far as what you could get out of the food plot. I just want to make sure that everybody out there is able to have what they need. If anybody ever needs to, they can give me a call. The phone number for the office is 570-943-7626, and you'll reach us there at Pleasant Valley, and you'll be able to go from there. Like I said, we can provide a full consultation. We also provide, I don't build them, but there's a couple companies out there that make like a 360 hunting blind. I have a company that I use. These guys have been great. They're very economical. I think they're probably around right now $3,500 to $4,000 for this stand that you see on the picture that I'm holding up. That stand right there, they'll actually come, drive right up to you and install the whole thing. They build it on site. They seal all the corners with silicone. The whole thing's padded and carpeted. There's no bugs that get in. And it's probably one of the best ideas you can do if you're going to have an area where you're going to have, younger people that are hunting and you need to cover those stands. And then more importantly, the deer get used to them. And that's also as more important than anything when you have a food plot is change. Have deer there all the time. And again, if you're doing the food plot year after year and it becomes generational, and a lot of people like to leave their breeder does, anything that's going to change it up is going to cause a little bit of excitement and have them deer that aren't comfortable. And that's where I think the main part of our hunting is, which I'll go over in our next episode. But like, I believe in low disturbance is key. Don't go in the woods. Whatever you do not penetrate the woods. Stay out of the woods. And with the cell camera technology now, you don't have to be going in and checking batteries, depending if you put your cell cameras in the woods. I completely stay out of the woods. I want those doe that are there to be very comfortable. I want those doe to be on the food plot early, and I'll get the buck out early when it comes right. I also believe that, cameras that you have now are such an important tool, but you also have to remember that those cameras aren't everything. I've been in my stand, sitting there on the food plot, and a lot of our food plots, mostly I would say that the traffic is 3-sided. I try to have, obviously, winds everything. Our access is from one side. More importantly, getting in the stand's important, but getting out of it's more important. You have 20 deer, say your target buck didn't show up that day. You want to be able to get out of that stand without blowing the whole food plot and kicking all the doe out. Because the more and more you hunt it, the later and later those doe are going to get, and the more, suspect they get to somebody's being there. So you have to be able to get out of that food plot without blowing the whole thing and blowing all the work you've done by letting those deer there. And you got to keep those old doe around. So wind's important. Access is important. And then, being able to have the direction you need, be able to hunt. Now I'm hunting mainly for myself a little bit anymore, but I'm hunting with my wife and my kids. Pennsylvania has, adopted crossbows as a legal means of archery hunting, which is absolutely incredible for our kids. I wasn't able to hunt till I was 12, and you get thrown out there the first day with a rifle in the cold, and that's it. That's how you started. Now we have, our youth seasons, and by the use of a crossbow, they can enjoy all archery season, where a kid, usually couldn't draw a vertical bow. I'm a huge vertical bow fan. I've been hunting since I've been 12 with the bow. I'm a venture hunter. I go out west every year for mule deer and antelope, and I love my regular bow, but there's nothing like being able to sit there with a crossbow and a tripod and a scope and being able to see your kids, minimize a bad shot. And the equipment they have now, I own a couple Ravens for myself and my kids when it's go time and we're all spread out, we're hunting, and they're just the most deadly piece of equipment out there. I mean, we've taken a couple deer now at 60, 70 yards, and I would never even ever think about doing that with a bow. And it's difficult when you're in a blind, just drawing a bow. It's not easy, and it's not about the buck you want to shoot. It's about the 20 doe that have been standing there at 25 yards all night. Just that movement of pulling your arm back is just always alerts everything that's in the food plot. I always had a hard time hunting on the ground with a bow, and just being able to have that crossbow is changed our family and our success. Absolutely. I think too, like I said, the business of the plot industry is very difficult because, first of all, like, getting the equipment there, I think, is the biggest problem for people. Everybody has like their farmer buddy that sometimes can make it, sometimes he doesn't, and their equipment's too big, it can't get into where they need it to be. Or it's the other way around. You're a homeowner style equipment where you have like smaller tractors or four-wheelers, and then it's like there's either the equipment's too big or the equipment's too small. And all those people out there are weekend warriors. They're awesome. I mean, I have a lot of people that do it themselves. They have a couple tractors, but again, equipment nowadays isn't cheap. If you really want to go out there and get a nice tractor that's above 50 horsepower, which is what you need to really start pulling ground, you get yourself a disc, cultipacker, your spreaders, all your stuff like that. It really, you can get around $100,000 real quick. And then, to purchase, like I said, all the stuff that you need for the food plot, it's just easier. And that's why I put myself out there to be able to do this service for people, because I don't want to see them making mistakes and wasting money. call us and we'll do everything, like I said, from setting up your tree stands to consult on your whole property. And for those people out there too that are, doing the food plot, I see a couple people that they really make some errors. I think what I see people doing most often is they bury the seed too deep. They haven't been able to really figure out, like, you're actually more okay with having a seed laying on the surface than too far in the ground. We all know that. Not everybody, excuse me, we all don't know, but the rule of thumb is a seed gets planted depth of the seed coat. So basically like that real small peppery brassica stuff, clover, all that stuff can just be broadcasted, and just from it hitting the ground and getting itself under or getting rained on is enough to actually plant it. You don't need to bury stuff. I've had some customers already that literally like disked everything, put the seed down, and disked the whole field again because they just didn't know. They thought that's what you did. And then they wasted all the seed they bought. I mean, they only had probably 25% germination rate, and it was a shame. I've had people already put their seeds down and they literally went and spread manure over top of it. And they thought that was what you're supposed to do. You cover up your seed like you would straw over grass, I guess they thought. And again, they wasted $200 in seed. I see a lot of people, like we spoke about earlier about lime, they had no idea about the fertility and the pH of the soil. And they wondered again why their food plot didn't come up as good. Also, again, people didn't put in an exclusion cage, and they couldn't figure out why their food plot was only 6 inches tall, and had no idea, that all these deer would do the damage that it does. But yeah, so the service that we can provide at Pleasant Valley is something that I think is going to be smart. We're right now, I think, with our 2 pieces of equipment and the timing we're at, we did probably last year close to 75 acres. Where I actually tilled ground. I managed another 40 acres of clover that we do pre-emergent and spraying to keep anything, the competitive weeds out, and then fertilizing in late summer, early fall. And then I consulted for probably about another 75 acres that I sold seed to, or got to properties. We also have a small lime truck that I'm able to get pretty much anywhere to get lime down. So we provide a lot of other services on the agricultural sides, more so than just doing food plots. Okay, everybody. So coming to a close here on our first podcast. I hope that everything I was able to talk about today can really help you guys in the future. And I also really wanted to help you guys have an avenue by giving us a call again at 570-943-7626 for your different seed blends, mineral, consultation, whatever you want us to do, plant food plot spraying, helping you along. That's what I'm here for, and that's what I do. So I'd appreciate it if you guys would stay tuned for the next couple podcasts, and I hope by the time you're done listening to everything I have to say, it can either get you where you need to be on your successful food plot or get me to your property to build it for you and be able to get some deer down on the ground. So thanks again. See you soon.